comfortable physically, and sometimes you can make yourself mentally comfortable as well by just reminding yourself that there's nothing too serious going on in this practice. We can leave anytime. We can stretch, we can move our postures, we can cough and sneeze, we can be completely easy. Just so that our body knows that it has all of these options. So that the mind knows that we're here because we want to be here. Let's release any expectations we have of a practice such as this. And it's very easy to enter into a practice with expectations that my mind is going to be absolutely still, like the same way my mind became still during one of those other practices the other day. But no, we're just here to allow the present moment to exist in its entirety. Maybe to recharge our batteries as well. One thing I've come to realize, I'll just talk you into the practice very gently. One thing I've noticed about many of us who enter into practices such as this is that we do care a lot about the people around us. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. Sometimes we serve strangers we've never known before, and sometimes it's our own family members, friends, neighbors. Some of us even work for charities on a voluntary basis. Some of us through paid positions. But many people who are drawn towards practices such as this, they somehow seem to understand the connection that we all have with each other, and therefore have an understanding and a knowing of the need to serve. We see the smiles. We sometimes say words or perform actions that bring relief to those around us. And today's practice, everything that we give to those around us, we use this practice as an opportunity to now recharge our own batteries, to serve ourselves. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard some teachers use the analogy of how when we are in an aeroplane, you'll notice that one of the first announcements, the safety announcement at the start of the flight, the voice on the intercom, it tells us that, especially if we're traveling with vulnerable people, whether it's young children or someone who has a disability or the elderly, if you have someone you're caring for, the voice on the intercom, it reminds you to, if there is an emergency and the oxygen masks fall from the ceiling, the roof of the plane, first we are reminded to put the oxygen masks on our faces, and then only apply it to the child or whoever is under our care. And very often, many of us here, we forget to do that. And we serve and we serve and we try to please and we try to help, completely forgetting about ourselves. And we remind ourselves that it's important to look after ourselves, to balance ourselves, to recharge ourselves, to breathe. And to enter into a practice such as this is such an opportunity where we do indeed recharge ourselves. Speaking of oxygen and oxygen masks, let us breathe. Let us breathe more consciously than we've ever done so before. Let us begin the practice by breathing in deeply. I will ring the bell. And each and every one of us, we will invite our attention to the flow of breath entering into our bodies through our nostrils, and then observing it as it exits, as it leaves, as we exhale, as we breathe out. Reminding ourselves that amongst all of our possessions, our homes, our clothes, our cars, our shoes, it is our breath that is the most precious, even more precious than the water that we drink and the food that we consume. And let us give it that attention. Let us give it the attention that it deserves as we enter into this practice. But the breath, it's invisible. It's invisible. How do we appreciate it? How do we experience it? For this, let us awaken the skin. The skin within our nostrils, within our nasal passage. That skin against which the air brushes against as it moves in and then out. feeling the temperature of the breath, feeling the humidity level of the breath, even the little things like the direction of the breath. Feeling all of the surfaces within the nasal passage and even outside of the nostrils. There are certain parts, such as the upper lip, where you can still feel the air moving in and out. Feeling the changes in the temperature and the humidity levels. Following the breath as deep into the nasal passage as you possibly can. Even seeking out that innermost part where it begins to bend downwards and move into the throat through the windpipe. And so you're beginning to discover how deep into the nasal passage you can still experience your breathing process. And at the same time reminding ourselves that this isn't, our mind can sometimes overcomplicate the practice by analyzing and overthinking the breath. But all we are really interested in are the simplest, most basic sensations: coolness, warmth, what it feels like when it flows in a particular direction, what it feels like when it flows in the opposite direction. As your mind aligns itself with the skin and the lining within the nasal passage, it enters into the present moment. It joins us here in the now. It leaves many of the stories that up until a few moments ago it has been clinging on to. Stories from the recent past, as recent as maybe even a few minutes ago. Maybe even the last 3 breaths ago when your mind wandered. Sometimes the mind just goes back a few minutes, sometimes a few seconds, sometimes a few days, a few weeks, a few years, and sometimes a whole lifetime. And sometimes, as you probably know, it overtakes the present moment. Jumping forward into the future. Sometimes very simple things like the plans that you have for later on today, the plans for the weekend. And sometimes if you've paid a great deal of attention to the news, or you've been reading some of those internet stories, or received messages on social media talking about the economy, about jobs, it jumps into the future and it begins worrying and calculating and trying to imagine what it's going to be like. And I know that my voice has perhaps taken you away into the past and into the future, but that is the beauty about this practice, because we are learning how to bring it back into this stillness of this present moment, and we do it in an instant with an intention to investigate the sensations that are unfolding right now. And at this moment, we're using our breath and the skin within the nasal passage and the upper lip, which are our doorways into this unfolding, into this process called breathing, this process called breath, referring specifically to the breath that is either flowing out or into your bodies right now at this moment. And have you noticed that as you investigate, as you take interest, as you direct your attention to this process called breathing, you will notice that you feel warmth, you might feel coolness, you might feel humidity or even the dryness of the air around you as you breathe in. All of these words that I use, these labels that you see arising, warmth, humidity, coolness, they are indicators that the mind has joined us in this present moment, that the mind has left the past, that the mind has released the future imaginings, the future imaginings, and joined us in this present moment. Because it is the mind which is the tool through which we translate these sensations that we're experiencing. Because in this present moment, in this moment, right now, all you experience are sensations. Whether it's within your nasal passage, whether it's somewhere around or within your body, all you experience are sensations, and there is no judgment. It's neither warm nor cool, neither flowing in nor out. Because in this present moment, none of these meanings exists, none of these judgments exists. It's only the mind that has learned how to label. It's the mind that learned, perhaps as a child, what an in-breath is, what an out-breath is. And slowly you begin to learn what humidity is. And then you learned what warmth is. You learned what coolness is. You even learned direction. It's something we learned. It's a word. You learned this. And so you begin to recognize how the mind is a library of information. And right now we are using this library to our advantage. We're learning to use it to our advantage. And very often, if you've ever felt frustration, anger, sadness, any of those emotions that feel anything but good, it's usually an indicator that the mind is using us. The mind is taking us away along with its judgments, and we have accidentally and mistakenly identified ourselves as the mind, which is always traveling into the past or into the future. And this is a practice where we begin to discover the relationship between the mind and the body. And one thing we will begin to, through this process of observation, realize, one thing we will begin to realize is that the body cannot distinguish between the past, the future, and the present. Whatever we think about, the body believes it to be true. If you think about some event in the past which was quite traumatic or upsetting, the body, it releases the stress hormones, the chemicals, the stress chemicals, the worrying chemicals, and you actually begin to feel it. And the same with the future. It does not understand or have the ability to distinguish. And that's why our thoughts seem so real. And this is a practice where we find tools such as our breath, tools that will help us to anchor ourselves into this present moment. Because notice, right now, the only fact, the only reality is that you are sitting here breathing. I am sitting here breathing. Feel your body. You can wriggle your fingers, you can wriggle your toes. Feel the seat underneath you. Feel your body's posture. And then notice where your mind is. If you're thinking about something that someone said to you, a conversation or some event, notice that you are thinking about it from this present moment, and you're not there. You're not at that conversation. You're not at that event. If you're thinking about the plans that you have later on, you're not there, but you're in this present moment thinking about the future. And so the body, it does not have that ability to distinguish. And so just breathe. Bring yourself back to your breath. Bring yourself back to the air that is flowing in and out through your nostrils. Experience the air from within your nasal passage. Follow your breath deeper down your windpipe and begin experiencing your breath through your stomach. And again, this isn't as complicated as it can sometimes sound. All you're interested in is the stomach wall. Notice the way in which the stomach wall moves in accordance with the direction of your breath. When you move in, when the breath moves in, when you inhale, the stomach wall, notice what happens. It normally rises. The skin stretches. Notice the sensation. And notice how the mind is helping us to decipher these sensations. Let us know that this is what it feels like for the stomach to balloon, for the skin to stretch. As you exhale and as you breathe out, notice how the stomach wall falls. And if you like, you can join in this little game and simply label, just when you breathe in, repeat the word rising, 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 and watch the stomach wall rise. And when you exhale, falling, 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 and watch the stomach wall fall as you would a very light feather falling back onto the earth, rising, rising. And this is a practice that you can use at any time, the rising and falling when you find yourself being carried away by your thoughts. Just first of all, just becoming aware of the way in which you feel. And anything that doesn't feel good, any emotion that you feel that feels anything less than good, is usually an indicator that we're being carried away by our thoughts. And so our emotions become our indicators to bring ourselves back to our breath. And then if you're breathing in, rising, 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 and if you're exhaling, falling, falling. And you center yourself, you ground yourself, just as you are right now, grounded, sitting, breathing. In the same way, you might be walking somewhere, you might be cooking your food, you might be having a meal, and the thoughts begin. You transport yourself into the past or into the future. And then you become aware of that you're feeling a little less than good. And that becomes your indicator. That you are being carried away by your thoughts. And then you become aware. And that awareness, immediately you awaken this witnessing presence. And then you observe your breath. For some of us, we're more comfortable. We find it easier to observe the breath through the stomach, and for some of us, we find it a little bit easier to observe it through the nasal passage, the breath through the nostrils. We ground ourselves, and then we take the next step, and then we breathe, ground ourselves. And then the next step. When I ring the bell, use it as an opportunity to expand your awareness from the skin within the nasal passage, from the skin around and within the stomach. Allow your awareness to now expand throughout your whole body, the skin all around your body. Using your skin as a window, a doorway into the present moment. Feeling what your clothes feel like at this moment. Feeling all of those indicators that seem to tell you that you are here seated or lying down, or whatever posture it is you have adopted. All of those indicators that tell you that you're in front of your phone, your tablet, or your computer, basically that you're not there in the past and you're not there in the future, that you are here in the now. What are the indicators that seem to tell you that? Your legs might be folded. Certain parts of your leg may be in contact with the flooring, with the carpet, with the chair or the cushions underneath you. Your joints, your limbs may be at certain angles because of the way in which the limbs are folded. So even though your eyes are closed, through your experience of sensations, you're beginning to piece together a jigsaw puzzle of sorts that seem to indicate the position that your body has adopted. And then, of course, there is that other doorway into the present moment, which is your sense of hearing. What can you hear at this moment? I don't know if you can. I know that you can hear the bell. You can hear the sound of the bell and the way in which it echoes. I don't know if my microphone is sensitive enough to pick up on the sound of the raindrops falling on my window. And maybe you might be able to hear the sound of raindrops where you are as well. And then very gently you begin to become aware of how we are surrounded by a soundscape. Many different sounds. Some of them sounds that we like. Some of the sounds we wish they would go away. And some of the sounds we don't even know that they're there because they have very little effect on us. They're just neutral. They're just in the background. And examples of sounds like that would be the sound of your fridge, the sound of, sometimes it's things like the heating, the ticking of a clock. Sometimes sounds that you barely even notice because they're not annoying you, nor are they attracting you in any way. It's usually the sounds that we like or dislike that get our attention. Have you noticed that? And that is another indicator of the way in which the mind directs us, directs our attention. What about the sounds around you? Are there any that are disturbing your practice right now? And don't feel bad if there are any, because they are the greatest tools in a practice such as this, the ones that we don't like. And so if there is a sound around you that is distracting you or disturbing your practice, initially you might just want to thank it for being there, because you're going to simply use it as a tool, a very precious tool in this practice. Because you're beginning to realize through this practice that if there are sounds that you dislike, that you would like to mute or do away with, it's normally a very strong indicator that we want the present moment to be different from the way it is. We are pushing against that particular sound because we don't like it. And notice how you are becoming aware of this pattern. And sometimes this practice may seem quite frivolous and pointless, but it is this exact same principle that we use with our thoughts. Because very often we have thoughts that we know do not serve us, that upset us, make us feel less than good. And the more we dislike a particular thought, the more we fight against it, we push against it. The more we dislike a sound, the more we push against it. We begin this dialogue in our head that tells it, go away, I'm supposed to be meditating, you're disturbing me. And sometimes it could be the voice of someone in the next room, or footsteps, car alarms, loud machinery going on outside your window. But every single one of those become a tool in this practice, especially those thoughts. Because the law of physics, they apply more than ever in this practice. And if you know anything about the laws of physics, it's where if you push against something, it pushes back in exactly the same force. The more you fight against something, the more it fights against you. Your muscles become tense. Notice how your muscles are. Notice how your body feels, how your joints feel. And we've all been in those discussions, those debates, those arguments with those around us, where the more we try to assert our point, the more they try to assert their point. Sometimes even becoming more assertive when it's to do with conversations. But let us remind ourselves that another way of describing this practice is allowing. It is a practice of allowing, where instead of attempting to stand in front of the charging bull, sometimes we are running head on towards the bull, and some of these thoughts, some of these sounds, that's what they appear to be like. Habits, old habits that have picked up a great deal of momentum. Habitual thoughts, the ways in which we've identified ourselves, the way in which we identify people around us, the way in which we've labeled certain experiences in our life. But what does allowing mean? It's a lot easier. It simply means stepping aside. Visualize yourself stepping aside, and the bull, the thought, the sound, it's gathered a great deal of momentum. It's moving at a very fast speed. And when you move aside, it continues to charge, but it's missed you completely. And then you begin to recognize that this art of allowing is so much easier than pushing against. Come back to that sound. Is there a sound that's distracting or disturbing you? Imagine the sound as for what it really is, actually. You don't even have to imagine it. They're just vibrating air molecules. They're just vibrating air molecules surrounding us. Even my voice, my vocal cords are somehow vibrating and causing a chain reaction of molecules which ultimately reach your ears. But that's all they are. They're vibrating air molecules. They're neither loud nor soft, neither good nor bad. And they don't even have any meaning. They do not even have any meaning. They move into your ears. And then there's the eardrum. It begins to vibrate. It's like a little drum. And then on the other side of the eardrum, there are tiny little bones. They too begin to vibrate. All as a result of these vibrating air molecules that reach them. And then these tiny bones, they cause electrical charges, electrical signals. And these electrical signals, they get sent into the brain. And it's still simply electrical charges. It has no meaning until the mind gets involved. Notice how the mind is a filter. And then the mind, it gives meaning to every sound that it hears. Even the words that are coming from, that are being released from my vocal cords, absolutely no meaning. You are giving it me. You are giving these sounds meanings. And you know this because if I switch languages, if I use a different language which you're unfamiliar with at this moment, all you will hear is sounds. Because your mind is unfamiliar with the particular language, it will not be able to give meaning to any of those sounds that are coming from my vocal cords. And then you begin to very gently realize the power of the mind, how it is indeed a library of information and meanings, and you begin to feel empowered in every conversation that will take place from this point onwards. There comes an understanding, a realization that we choose the meanings that we give to the words uttered by all of those around us. We may choose to allow these sounds to affect us or not. We may choose to laugh at these words, or simply allow them to flow through us and past us. We may choose which sounds to give significance to. And which ones to simply allow. And when I use the word allow in this case, I simply mean allow to flow through us, becoming transparent to the words. Let's practice that now, shall we? I will ring the bell and focus on the sound waves emanating from this this bell. Visualize, if you like. And a really nice visualization that we've used often in the past is that of a very still pond, and how every ringing of the bell, every time you hear the bell, it's like a little pebble dropping onto the center of the still pond, causing ripples. In the visualization, it's ripples on the surface of the pond. And for the sounds around us, it's the ripple of sound waves traveling through us. But let us use these sound waves, invite them into our bodies. Let us invite these sound waves, embrace them, allow them, but not hold on to them. Allow them to move through our bodies, each bell allowing our bodies to dissolve a little bit more. Maybe starting by simply the first few bells, just loosening your skin, feeling the skin around your scalp and your forehead loosen itself. The skin around your chest and your backs and your stomachs and your lower backs, all the way down to the legs and the tips of the toes, the skin loosening itself. And now the layer underneath the skin, the layer of muscle and whatever else, the cells underneath the skin, loosening, relaxing, allowing, dissolving. The bones underneath and the joints that seem to connect them. The shoulder joint, the elbows, the knees, the fingers. And the organs within the ribs, within the upper body, within the lower regions of the body, the blood cells, the nerves. You don't have to visualize it too much, just create intentions and then simply allow the body to take care of the rest. The body is very obedient to the mind. Or at least it gradually becomes more and more obedient through this practice, as it realizes that the witnessing presence that we are has only its best interests in mind. And now, with each bell allowing the skin to dissolve and melt into the space around you, so that these sound waves, they simply pass through your body. But you will notice there are still tiny little pockets of tightness in different parts of your body. Some of us, it might be within certain organs of the body. For some of us, it's within our digestive system. For some of us, it's within the muscle and sometimes the muscles are the easiest to notice just because we wear them and we experience them most of the time. But allowing each bell to dissolve and allowing these sound waves to carry some of these pockets of tension and tightness with them as these sound waves pass through our body. And it's If you have quite a scientific mind, then just remind yourself what every scientist in this room will remind us, that our bodies are made up of nothing more than atoms and molecules. And if the body is made up of nothing more than atoms and molecules that reflect light because of the way in which they are arranged, that means there is nothing but space in between these atoms and molecules, between the electrons and the nucleus. And most of our body, 99.9%, more than 99.9% of our body is nothing but space. And so it becomes even easier to allow these sound waves to move through us. It becomes a lot easier to feel the lightness that comes with the space around us. And if you like, begin allowing your identification to shift from this form that we call our bodies into the space around us. Initially, maybe just a few millimeters around the body, but then each sound wave carrying us a little bit further until you begin inhabiting the four corners of the room in which your body is positioned in. Moving through the tiny little gaps underneath windows, through keyholes, under the doors, into the corridors and the spaces outside of your room. Your atoms and molecules blending into those atoms and molecules that surround you. That of the oxygen, the carbon, the nitrogen, the tiny gaps within your furniture, even the furniture itself through the walls. And then blending into the light that seems to be enveloping the space outside of our rooms and our homes and our flats and our buildings. Shifting our identification into this space, absorbing some of the qualities of light. In fact, why don't we absorb all of the qualities of light, which seems to travel at very high speeds? And so for just an instant, it no longer matters where your loved ones are. Some of us have loved ones who are quite far away geographically from where we are positioned at this moment. But let us, having obtained this quality of light, allow this light to reach all of those whom we care about deeply. This light which is almost impossible to distinguish because it's just light. Indivisible, it's just light. It's the absence of darkness. And every single one of us seated in this practice, we are experiencing this light somehow through our windows, through electricity, but it's the same light. And we are, through our mind's eye, we allow this light to bathe those who we care about, entering in through their breath, sharing this experience that we are currently moving through, so that they too may experience whatever it is we are experiencing. Call it stillness, awareness, presence. And if you can notice that right now, most of us, we wouldn't dream of hurting anybody, speaking out hurtful words, performing hurtful actions. Which is simply a consequence of experiencing the stillness. Some teachers call it kindness, understanding, patience. And so as this light reaches these different forms who we care about, we release an intention that they too experience this, all that we are experiencing. And with this, we perhaps also come to the realization that when hurtful words emanate from their lips, when hurtful actions are performed, it usually comes from a space outside of this light, where they experience a disconnect from this light. Just as ourselves, we sometimes say words, perform actions, which we sometimes regret. And we forgive ourselves simply because these words and actions, there's a realization that these words and actions come from a space of disconnect. And then we allow this light to travel through to all of those some of those whom we've met but may not even know their names, that we've seen living under bridges, on the side of the roads, animals in farms and wherever else, in parks, in the wilderness, in the sky, in nests. Human beings we may never meet, living in refugee camps, in spaces, in many different spaces. And we release intentions that they too experience this light. And we add perhaps a few additional intentions that to those who are hungry, this light brings them food and full stomachs, young, old, adult. To those who are lonely, this light brings them company and smiles and laughter and joy. To those who are unwell, this light brings them healing, balance, the medicines that they believe will bring their bodies back into balance. And any other qualities you'd like to bring to this light. I'll ring the bell now. And as always, even though it indicates the end of our practice, it always indicates the beginning of the real practice, where we bring this light with us. into the world that will continue to unfold before us, petal by petal, just as a flower does, admiring every moment, treasuring every moment, releasing the need to be impatient, that impatience that sometimes can't wait to see the flower in full bloom, but everything in unfolding, our whole life in unfolding, every moment as precious as the next.